Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Chelsea Karst, and I'd like to take a brief moment to talk to you about the Ontario Trillium Foundation and why we're partnered with Tamarack to deliver this webinar series. If this is the first time you're hearing about the Ontario Trillium Foundation, there are two important things you should know. First, we are an agency of the Government of Ontario, and second, as one of Canada's leading grant-making foundations, we fund over $100 million to support projects in communities across Ontario every year. The mandate of the foundation is to build healthy and vibrant communities across Ontario, and we use our action areas to define what we mean by that. They are our vision and what we aspire to achieve. On the screen, you'll see those 6 action areas. They are active people with the goal of fostering more active lifestyles, connected people, which aims at building inclusive and engaged communities, green people, which is all about encouraging communities to support a healthy and sustainable environment, inspired people with the goal of enriching lives through arts, culture, and heritage, promising young people aims to support the positive development of children and youth, particularly those facing barriers, and finally, prosperous people looks to enhance Ontario's economic well-being, moving people from crisis to economic opportunity. We believe if we can make a measurable impact in those 6 areas, we will be able to achieve our foundation's mandate. Following this webinar, if you have any interest in learning more about the Ontario Trillium Foundation and its funding streams, you can visit our website at www.otf.ca, or you can contact our support center directly using the phone number or email on the screen. Thank you so much for joining today, and we hope that you find this webinar helpful in the work you do.
All right, thank you so much, Chelsea. It's now my pleasure to introduce your webinar speaker for today, Lindsay Sage. Lindsay is co-founder and senior strategist at SageComm. SageComm specializes in brand, product, and issue positioning for brands and causes across North America. Lindsay's passions are strategy and storytelling, and her day-to-day work focuses on the facilitation of strategic plans, solutions, and stories that build powerful, authentic brands. Lindsay takes great pride in SageComm's long-term client relationships and community partnerships. She's energized by helping clients create powerful narratives to build connections to audiences and communities in new and remarkable ways. Welcome, Lindsay.
Thanks very much, Duncan. I'm really excited to be back with you. Thank you for having me, and hello to everyone on the line. I'm excited to talk a little bit about delivering a great strategy to the market. I have quite a bit of content to go through, which I'll move through at a pretty decent clip, so we have some time to talk at the end and answer any questions or hear any comments that you might have about the content. It's interesting. It struck me today, my team here at SageComm, we've been watching the congressional hearings with Mark Zuckerberg over the last 2 days. There's a lot of interest around here. We do a lot of digital marketing work and a lot of interest around that particular issue in every conceivable way. So it just punctuates for me the importance of understanding an issue deeply and communicating really, really well. Because I think we could point out as a case study that this particular issue with Facebook and now Congress and Cambridge Analytica is a classic case really of people truly not understanding how something works and the implications of it. There's all kinds of other nuances to it, whether you're a Facebook fan or not, but certainly if you get a chance to check out the congressional hearings and the testimony, it is an interesting case study in communications and issue management. So anyways, I think this topic is always quite timely, but it strikes me that it's an interesting time to be having these great conversations about how we help people understand the complex issues that we deal with every day, in particular in the public sector and in the charitable sector as well. So let me see here. I'm just going to advance my slides. Oh, there we go. So here's what I'd like to do today. We're going to talk a little bit about effective issue positioning. Then we're going to talk practically about how do you deliver that awesome position to the market and what does a great plan look like? What does it include? What does it not include? And then I want to share I'm going to share throughout some work samples and in particular a case study about an issue positioning campaign that we did for a network here in London to tell you some of the insights we've had, some learnings, and certainly some humbling moments from the field as we work through this process. So that's the agenda today, probably about 25, 30 minutes, and then we'll have time for questions. So if you were on the webinar last time, about 2 weeks ago, we talked about basically preparing to plan. And two of the things that we focused on were stakeholder engagement and audience research. If you missed that, that's okay. There's nothing in here that's going to preclude you from following along. But I did want to mention before we get into actually talking about positioning and communication planning, that I really can't underscore enough how important we at SageComm anyways think these two foundational pieces are. So when we say stakeholder engagement, I'm referring to the engagement of people in your sector, people who have a passion for the same cause or issue or problem that you're trying to solve, and really engaging authentically with them. What that looks like is not necessarily at the end of developing your plan saying, hey, look what I made, what do you think of this? But really engaging authentically with your peers to really understand what are the issues and opportunities as it relates to this problem or issue that we're trying to position. There's a great deal of, you'll know, I mean, if you're into the work of collective impact, there's such a great deal of wisdom in that community collective. But we found with any issue campaign that we've ever worked on or any communication planning process in a complex issue environment, that stakeholder engagement in the sector is incredibly important to something being successful as it launches, but also successful in its sustainability long term. And then the second piece is audience research. And what I mean by that is actually diving deep with the audience that you hope to reach with your communication plan and actually asking them some questions and really understanding where are they coming from? What do they understand about this issue? What do they not understand? Or what is the particular problem our brand can help them solve, and understanding their motivations, their desires, their fears. And in that way, you really strengthen your ability to talk to them because you literally are speaking their language. You've taken the time to understand who they are and what they care about and what's going to resonate most with them. And that's a lot more effective than making an informed assumption. If you've been working in your sector or with your particular cause or issue for a long time, you're going to be pretty informed about your audience. But those are assumptions nonetheless, unless you check them. So certainly when we have limited time and budget and resources, this audience research aspect can really make or break how effective a campaign is. So just leave that with you in terms of these are important foundational steps before you actually get to the exercise of positioning and delivering that position to the market. So the first topic, as I mentioned, I'm going to talk about is effective issue positioning. Now, what do I mean when I say that? What I mean is a great position represents what you ultimately want the audience to believe. So if we could wave a magic wand right now and your particular audience group, whether you're raising money for a cause or raising awareness for an issue or a product or a brand, if you could wave a magic wand today and have them believe something about you, the most positive possible message from your perspective that causes them to take an action, that's your position. Okay? So really it's a story. It's a story you want the audience to understand, of course. You want them to be moved by it, and the goal in marketing these days is to share, right? You want them to be compelled enough by your story or the story of your brand or cause or issue to remark to someone else about it, whether in person or sharing on a social channel or sharing in another method. That really is gold, right? Compelling someone to share. A great position can help you compel people to take positive action towards your issue or brand. The reason that this is so important, in particular in our experience with the public sector, nonprofit, and charitable organizations, is you are mighty people that do the work of probably of millions of people with very small resources. But when your cause or issue doesn't have a lot of champions and has even fewer resources, which I'm sure a lot of you on the phone can relate to, great stories are really what wins for us. Our ability to tell a great story and cut through the noise that's out there, and it's significant, is what's going to allow you to, as we like to say, make a dent in the universe on behalf of your brand or your cause. That's why this stuff is so important. So from a practical perspective, what does that look like? So we like to say positions that spread or positions that win. Here are 4 tenets of what we believe a great story is comprised of. So great stories are clear and simple. So it is easy for me to get it. In the environment in which we're working, where we live in a culture of busy, or some might call it an epidemic of busy, where we all feel like we have too little time to do too many things, our ability to communicate and cut through noise is dependent on our ability to make the audience get something really fast. Because as you probably well know, if they don't get it or can't understand why it relates to them, they're scrolling past or they're driving on in whatever way they're doing that. So if I have to work hard to understand something, it's unlikely I'm going to make the effort to do so if I don't already have a connection to the particular cause or issue. And even if I do, still that can be an uphill battle. So clear and simple. The second sort of tenet of great stories is that they have impact. So they demonstrate the results. They're not about the program or service up front. They're not about the organization and how long it's been in continuous operation and how much money it raised last year or how many people it impacted. Off the top, as human beings, we want to connect to the actual impact of something. Tell me the results. Talk to me about the outcome of this thing. Inspire me with that. Related to that are personal and emotional. So I can relate to them in some way on a personal level, and your story makes an emotional connection with me. Ultimately, we are emotional beings. Humans are, although we often operate in the sphere of logic and reason in our professional lives. Ultimately, the things that cut through the noise for us are things that we can get at a personal level and that relate to us emotionally, whether it's positive or negative emotion. But I can tell you that I'd like to make the argument for positive emotion as it relates to most causes and issues, which I'm going to talk about in a few minutes. And then finally, of the four, it inspires action. So answering the question, what do you want me to do now? Now that you have my attention, you've given me a story that's easy to understand, I get the outcome and I've connected to it on an emotional level, what do you want me to do? And too often, or has been common in the recent past, communications plans or campaigns that are intended to drive awareness do just that. But when you've got a great awareness campaign, the logical question that someone's going to ask when you've got their attention is, what do you want me to do now? And if there isn't a tangible action step, then likely you've lost that person. You've lost that opportunity to get them to take one more step toward you, whether it's click on a link or ask someone for more information or fill out a contact form or tell their neighbor that they saw this thing and they were really moved by it. So inspiring action is incredibly important. And then finally, I would say this last one, great stories are about you or your brand, your cause, your issue last, actually, which sounds counterintuitive because when you're running an awareness or action campaign and you've got a great communications plan to tell someone something, it's on behalf of an organization or an issue that you are trying to steward in the most impactful possible way. But what we know from a lot of experience and research is that as human beings, we relate to things that are about us first and about others second. Whether that's good or not is kind of here nor there. That's how our brains work. So when we have delivered a story that people can connect to, that's easy to understand, that talks about the impact, that makes that personal connection, then we earn the right to tell them about the brand or cause or issue that we're representing. So great. How do you get to a great position? I'm going to recap on 2 slides the 7 principles of developing a great position that I talked about a couple of weeks ago, just at a high level to kind of set the stage for what I'm going to show you after, which is some examples of great positioning work. On your screen, number 1, develop a high level concept. So can you get to the point in 20 words or less? Believe it or not, it can be done. It can be done for every industry, from charitable causes to auto manufacturing to Hollywood. But you need to think carefully about your promise and convey it really concisely, right? Can you express what you're doing in 20 words or less and why it's important to people? If not, you've got to dig down into that. Second, lead with your point. So David Ogilvy said, your headline is 80 cents of your dollar. So it should really grab attention and make a promise, right? So you've already, he was fond of saying you've already spent 80 cents of your dollar. And David Ogilvy was a famous ad man back in the day. Probably some of Mad Men, the TV show, was based on his wisdom. So lead with your point. Don't bury the lead, as our newspaper friends would say. Emphasize your value from the audience perspective. So you have to answer those questions on behalf of your audience. Why should they care about this? What's in it for them? It's not about what you want to tell them. It's about what they can actually hear about something. And that has to do with how much time they have. It has to do with the emotional nature of the issue that you're talking to them about. But first and foremost, so emphasize your value from an audience perspective. Be brief and simple. In fact, be briefer than you ever thought possible. So when you want to add more content, consider cutting. There's real power in simplicity. And again, if you make me work hard to understand something, the chances are you're not going to keep my attention. So fifth, use visuals to convey meaning. Today, people would much rather watch a video or scan an infographic than read. So if you can use art to convey your meaning, that's awesome. Reduce friction in accessing information. So get people to the information they want quickly. Friction occurs when people are engaged, but they encounter a challenge trying to get the information they're interested in. So awareness campaign, great. What do you want me to do now? No clear step towards action. That's friction. And then finally, allow the audience to discover more detail if desired. So not everybody wants the full meal deal. They don't want the 200 facts. Give them a little taste, and then earn the right to tell them more based on what they're able to hear. So what does that look like practically? So I'm going to show you 3 examples of positioning in practice that we've worked on and actually had the great pleasure of working on in the last few years. The first one is a position from a violence against women organization who is trying to raise $1 million to build a new shelter in one of the most economically depressed regions of Canada. So the position goes like this. It invites people to ask themselves about what home means to them, what kind of home they want to create and aspire to for their children and grandchildren, what hopes they have for the future, you know, is that safety, security, etc. So the women and children that are served by this organization all want those same things. But ultimately, if we were to boil down the importance of this organization and boil down why they exist and why they need a new space, is because they need a room of their own. People who have experienced trauma and things most of us could never imagine, they need a room of their own. They need room for safety, for dignity, and for healing. And frankly, they need a room to sleep without fear. So this is the original position that we led with for this capital campaign. And you'll notice that it is very much oriented to the positive, to the aspirational, and to the outcome, and to asking the audience to relate in some way, in the way that they can. A lot of the audience can't relate to the experience of abuse, but they certainly can relate to the aspirations that we have for ourselves and our families as it relates to our security. So very practically, this is what that looks like as we manifest it into, from a plan into a campaign. Right? So ultimately, we're inviting people to build hope and to save lives through the construction of this new facility. And you can see there how the narrative follows, you know, joy and play no matter the age, not falling behind, community support for a room of their own, for that best night's sleep that a mother and her children may have had ever in years. Okay? So that's one example. The next example is around literacy awareness. I think I might have used some of these examples a couple of weeks ago, but this is a little bit more in depth on that. So the idea behind this is speaking to parents. So when you have a child, unless there are enormous extenuating circumstances, you take that first look into their eyes and you just think, my God, you have all the potential in the world and there isn't anything that I wouldn't do to help you achieve that. So that's what this position is built around. The core belief that parents already have that their child is born with potential. From that minute that they were born and we look at them, we want to help them change the world. And there's all different ways that parents want their kids to be successful. Some kids, you know, some parents want their kids to go to the moon or to Mars. Others want them to be the first kid in the family to go to college. And that's a big job. And we want to raise good, responsible, resilient children. And the argument of this campaign is that's where 2,000 words an hour comes in. If anyone's worked on literacy awareness campaigns in the past, you know that literacy isn't the most accessible topic. It's hard for people to get into. It's stereotypes to the child reading a book with a parent, and it's not always presented as exciting as it really is. So what we tried to do with this campaign in this particular position was to speak to parents where they were in their minds about their kids, that unlimited potential, and show them the potential outcomes if they were to focus on literacy more intentionally in their families, and what that looks like. So playing on those aspirations, this is just an example. We want our children to race us to school. We want them to feel secure and loved every day. We might aspire that they're going to change the reality of the world sees gender, or be resilient enough not to be bothered by the bully in the schoolyard. So the argument of this campaign to get the attention of parents is, if you focus a little bit more on words in your home more intentionally, you're going to get these outcomes for your kids, because you already believe that you want it for them and that they deserve it. And then the third one is an example of laying the foundation for a capital campaign supporting young mothers, teenage mothers, and their babies. So again, that relatable position. For so many of us, the joys of a new addition to the family is a joyful time, right? And most of us have had that experience. But if you don't have stability and support, it can mean a lot of scary things. Actual fear, isolation, the continuation of cycles of poverty, some really scary stuff that, although maybe our donor audience can't relate directly to having had that experience, can certainly relate to the joy that we feel when ourselves or someone in our family is going to bring a new addition into the world. So this is an opportunity, this position, to invite the community to make a choice to be there for the most vulnerable moments in the lives of these young moms and their kids, and to be there right from the very beginning, to help make a new cycle for them, and really ultimately to help ensure that more people in this community can grow up strong right from the very beginning. Okay? And how that has manifested itself physically or visually, some examples. The notion of being there right from the very beginning, these calls to action, say you're in to help make a new cycle. Again, not asking a donor to understand what it's like for a teenage mother who is at risk of homelessness or experiencing homelessness, but to at least relate to what a challenging time that is in our lives, and how we all need all the support we can get, and how we can help do that as a community on behalf of these vulnerable families. So if we cut right to the chase about positioning, as you start to develop this, you understand your audience, you start to talk to them, you really make sure that me factor is there, that it's aspirational, it speaks to that income, or that outcome, Here are some questions to give yourself to see, are we on the right track with our positioning? So does it speak to the audience where they are? And by where, I don't mean just, physically where they are, or if they're on Facebook, etc., but emotionally, where are they on this issue? What do they understand about it? What do they not understand? 2, is it remarkable enough? So is it something people will remark on and share? If I won't make a remark on it, then it maybe hasn't hit the mark in terms of being powerful enough. You're not going to leave the room, say, oh, that presentation I just saw was interesting, and haven't made a remark on it, then maybe I've missed my mark today. Number 3, is it true and authentic versus being sensationalized or causing people to be shocked or discomforted by a particular position, which sometimes in our industry we call issue porn, if you excuse the expression. It's almost exploitive to the audience that you're trying, or to the clients or the people that you're trying to help. Number 4, does it focus on desired outcomes and impacts? And number 5, does it address the most important factor, which is the me factor, or answer the question why? As in, how will this affect me, and why should I care? That's how we get people's attention and earn the right to tell them more. Here are some of the things that we have discovered. I'll just leave this here with you. It's through audience research exercises that audiences actually don't respond to. So shock or fear or discomfort, information overload for sure, or request to relate. So as a mom, I care deeply about causes and issues related to children, child poverty, medical and healthcare concerns related to children. But what I can't actually relate to the experience of a mother who's had a sick child, or of a young mother who's suffering from mental illness or addiction and is at risk of homelessness. So when we ask our audiences to relate directly to that experience, they can't do that. When we find something they can relate to as it relates to the topic, such as wanting something special for our children from the moment we meet them, or wanting to have safety and security in the bed that we sleep in, or wanting to have the best possible experience in the early days of our children's lives and to be safe in that time, that I can relate to as a potential audience. So how do we deliver this winning position to the market? There are three things you want to achieve or are likely trying to achieve in combination from communications planning. Awareness is one, the second is education and action. Usually when we put a campaign together or a communications plan, we don't have one without the other. Sometimes there is an opportunity to only focus on awareness, but if you're going to put that effort forward and you do have the resources, when you can move people from knowing something exists to learning a little bit about it, and then if you're really successful, to getting people to say, yes, you can tell me one more thing about that, or I'm ready to take an action, that's really where the goal is. Here's an example. This is a case I'm going to talk about in a few minutes, an example of what a campaign has looked like that's based on a communication plan to get people to better understand the issue of poverty in a community. So the research, the positioning, the strategy, and then a phased approach that takes you through awareness, education, and action near the end of the campaign. So the anatomy of a great plan, in our minds anyways, looks a little like this. Everybody likes to do their planning differently, and it doesn't have to be, strictly these 6 things. But the plans that we write and the ones that we find are successful incorporate these 6 items. And as much as possible, they're not 40 pages long. If they can be 6 or 8 pages, that gives you a much better chance that someone who's working with you is actually going to read the plan and engage with it. I'm sure we've all had the experience of being involved in a wonderful planning process, and it results in a very large document that looks great, and it sometimes sits on the shelf and gathers dust, unfortunately. Once in a while that happens. So 6 steps where you can get an excellent plan and achieve the impact you want to achieve without maybe killing all the trees with the 40-page plan. So I'm just going to walk through what are the key questions you need to answer in each of these 6 areas. So the opportunity, why are we doing this? Why would we undertake this? What is the case for even going through this exercise? 2, what are our goals and objectives? So what are we trying to accomplish? And how will we measure that? And those measurements are incredibly important because when you want to make the case to do something similar in the future, or you want to be able to show the powers that be, whoever that might be that you report to or work with in the community, how effective your communications plan and campaign was, those measurements are incredibly important. Number 3, the question is for audiences, who will we reach to achieve the goals that we've set out, and what do they care about? So this comes largely from your audience research, knowing what the fears and motivations and desires and pain points are of the audience you're trying to reach, and speaking to them. So you speak to them through your key messages and calls to action. So what do we want the audience to know, and what do we want them to do as a result of that? Number 5, what are our strategies? So how at a high level will we connect our messages and calls to action to the audience to achieve our goals? Okay. And then finally, this is where you could get into a little bit more of that detail. Probably this is the most important part for detail, is in the tactical plan. So this is your roadmap. It is a specific, measurable action plan. It's got timelines, it's got details, it's got accountabilities. Who's going to do what when in order for us to drive all the way up, back through our goals, achieve those goals and objectives, and ultimately capitalize on whatever opportunity it is we've set out to capitalize on or set out to achieve, right? So if you write a plan with those 6 elements, that's really all you need to put a great communications plan together. It does not have to be 40 pages, and likely there's not a person on this call who has the time to write a 40-page plan, because you're out there doing the work that needs to be done to advance your brand or your cause or your issue. So I want to talk just a little bit more about practically and tactically selecting your channels. This is a bit of a joke. I know I spoke about Facebook at the beginning, but I can tell you there's been more than one time in my career as a strategic marketer and a consultant when someone has said, you know what I think we need to do? We need to get on the Facebook. That seems to be where everybody is. So let's just get a Facebook page up, and that'll be the sum total of the marketing activities we do this year. Facebook is an incredibly powerful tool, and we're experiencing as a society right now just how powerful it can be for all kinds of things. But you really have to ask yourself, are we speaking to our audience where they are, where they actually are? So selecting those appropriate channels should be based on research and targeting, not preference. So a full page ad in the Globe is awesome. They're beautiful, they're splashy. The Globe is a great publication, Globe Mail here in Canada. But does it reach the target we're trying to reach? So I use millennials in this example. But are millennials reading the paper copy of the Globe? I don't know. Maybe they are. Certainly I'm reading it every Saturday, and I'm definitely not a millennial. But we need to ask ourselves that question. Even though everyone maybe associated with the brand or the cause feels good, if we have an ad in the Globe, does it actually reach the target? Second, Facebook ads look awesome, but are major donors there? So if you look at the profile of major donors, for most causes right now, they're in a particular demographic that's a little bit at the older end, and in specific, lots of them still are male, maybe between 60 and 75, who are making the decisions about major gifts to foundations and associations. So are they on Facebook? We got to ask ourselves that. Or, radio's got a special promotion. Great, they have some great specials on radio, but is that where mom is going to find out about kids programming? In my experience, mom finds out about great kids programming from other moms. So asking yourself what channel is appropriate to activate that audience is really important. So we use this expression quite a bit, a little bit jokingly, but it is true, that if you don't take the time to think about where your audience is and do that targeting, you sort of might as well burn your money on the sidewalk, because it might not be as effective as it could be. So really thinking deeply about those channels can save you time and resources when you probably don't have a lot of time and financial resources for these things to start. So what's first and last when you talk about a communications rollout? These are some of the principles that we stick to. We like to do a soft launch off the hop. Make sure everything's working the way you want. It looks great. All of the stakeholders that need to be informed about this plan are informed, they're engaged, and let it test, just even for a day or a couple of days. Test it out, roll out with a specific audience. Have that soft launch. Work as much as possible to amplify your organic reach through influencers in the community. As much as you can. We, for example, have used actual Amplify days, where we ask every person in the sector who's involved in the cause or issue and has been involved in the development of a particular plan or campaign to actually participate in a 12-hour period where we flood the market with information about this particular issue and try to build the following right off the hop. You want to roll out in bite-sized phases, so don't dump all of your information into the market at once. Roll out through that awareness, education, and action streamline if you can. You want to measure continuously through a planned rollout, not just at the end, because if you need to tweak something because a particular message or a channel is not, or medium is not performing, you want to know that a month into the campaign, not 6 months down the line when the campaign is already over. Next, I would always suggest that you report, even if your campaign or plan doesn't fully achieve its goals. The ability to report on that and demonstrate that you understand maybe why something didn't perform the way you thought is also incredibly important, and debriefing and making sure you learn why that happened. Or on the reverse of that, learn why something was incredibly successful and how do you capture that information and replicate it so in the future you're not reinventing the wheel. And then finally, have a plan for sustainability. So every wonderful campaign gets a lot of, if it's effective, it gets very exciting, everybody sees it, everyone's jazzed about it, and you get to the end of the campaign period and that's it. Well, what are we doing with it now? It really thinking throughout the development of a campaign, in particular in the charitable and nonprofit everyone. Results of that, we were able to generate 12 million impressions through digital and traditional advertising, which is about 30 impressions per citizen in this community. We were able to, I'm just looking through the report here, 3,400 people took an action towards signing up or volunteering or learning more about a particular cause or issue that they could get around. We had $127,000 in value in earned media, so public relations that our newspaper partner was able to give to us because they could buy in to this issue. 12,000 comments and shares, over 12,000, almost 13 on social media. And we even had a meme that was created by the local radio station. If you look at the ad that says it's an us problem, if you put the AN and the US together, which we didn't notice until someone else did it on our behalf, it actually makes a different word. But that turned out to be a good issue because we then got to go on the local radio and the local rock morning show and talk about why this issue was so important. So we set out to shift perceptions, but we really felt that we had sparked a movement. And this is just a cross-section of the number of community leaders who came out to support this campaign from every conceivable background and walk of life. So to wrap up, I'm going to tell you a few things that we now know from working on some of these campaigns. The 10 steps that we take to writing what we think are good plans are these. You really discover and understand and define research, really deeply understand the issue, build a champion network, develop your personas, make sure you really get those audiences well, define the position, and then simplify it and simplify it again and simplify it again, and then make it a great story. You test and refine things to make sure that even if you think it's a great story, it's actually landing with the audience you want to engage. You build a phased plan and then use that plan to deliver your message. And then you repeat the message until people are sick of hearing it, literally sick of hearing it. That's almost a good sign that it's landing and people are internalizing it. And then you measure and you make sure you report back on that measure. And if you can, you continue to invest. Otherwise, you might find yourself in what we might affectionately refer to as the doom cycle, which is, you have this great momentum, you go up, up, up around the curve and everyone's excited, and then the campaign ends and we fall around the other side of the loop. And 2 years from then, someone says, hey, we should have an awareness campaign on this. And then you start the loop again. When you find a great campaign and it lands with your community and the communications plan has really worked well, it's okay to continue to invest in the same thing. Yeah. So finally, a couple thoughts. Awareness and action campaigns are more important than ever before for the issues that we are facing as a society and as a nation, but they're also under scrutiny now more than ever. So we're always under scrutiny for how we're spending our dollars and why we're spending them in the way that we are. So we need to be really conscious of that when we go into any communication plan or campaign. But we also know, even though we're under more scrutiny and we're trying to do more with less, that the more people understand the issue, the more people we have to solve it. Literally, when we have voters who understand an issue better and demanding more from their government decision makers, or parents who are having these conversations at home, who are encouraging a different way of thinking in a new generation than previously. Basically, when we have more hands and more hearts, we have more people to help us solve these issues. And that's why it is so incredibly important. And finally, one of my favorite mentors in the world always loves to say to me, if no one's talking about you, you're doing something wrong. So when you've pushed it enough to the limit that people are interested, they're surprised, they're even possibly objecting to how you've gone about something, as long as it's not offensive, you're probably doing something right then. If no one's talking about it, then it's not as remarkable maybe as it could be. And then finally, realize that you are boiling the ocean, and boiling the ocean doesn't happen overnight, and that's okay. But the consistent, strategic view on communication planning and the delivery of a really potent message can actually warm that ocean up. So the more you do it and the more you repeat, you have that great position and you repeat it to an audience that you really deeply understand, the more effective you're going to be and the bigger dent in the universe you're going to be able to make. So just a couple of final thoughts. We don't think there's a plan without research and positioning. That's, for your consideration. You want to make the investment in dollars, but also in engagement time with your sector and your stakeholders and influencers. It's about you last, even though none of us want to hear that, but it's really about the outcome. It's not about the cause or the agency delivering that outcome. It's about the outcome that I, as a citizen, can get involved in. You want to defend the audience and earn the right to tell them more. Know that you're boiling the ocean and make a plan to amplify and sustain that work. And I'll end by thanking the many organizations, some of which I highlighted here, that have let us at SageComm help them tell the remarkable stories, because I can tell you that we've learned more and been changed more as people by this work we've been able to do than possibly even the whole value of the work that we've provided to those clients. It's really incredibly enriching. So congratulations to all of you on the important work that you do. And that's it. Back over to Duncan.
All right. Thank you so much, Lindsay. That's really encouraging to hear. I actually just personally really appreciate that note about boiling the ocean. That's a really great image and a great way to describe that. Just first up, we have a question from Job. And just before that, just another reminder, we still have time for questions. So if you haven't sent in a question so far, you can do so using the question box or by emailing me directly at duncan@tamarackcommunity.ca. So this is from Job. How do you deal with competing interests? How do you change the perception in emotionally charged topics, such as advocating for harm reduction strategies with drug use, for example?
That is an excellent question. I love that question. In fact, we're right in the middle of a community dialogue here in London about that very issue, about harm reduction and safe consumption, actually, safe consumption sites. What we've found, I think, the most powerful in any issues that we've worked on has really been about figuring out what the audience is motivated by or afraid of, and trying to understand even those folks where you think, how could they possibly think that? There's some really ugly opinions, for example, in our community right now about the importance of helping people who are suffering from addiction and making value judgments about them. But part of the exercise is understanding the audience and where they're coming from, and then giving them the opportunity just to understand one more thing about the issue. So we have 200 things to tell them about why safe consumption is so incredibly important, but we need to start with the one that they can understand. And sometimes it's not the one that we want to tell them. So if we want to talk about the value of human life and why addiction services and safe consumption and harm reduction is essential as a healthcare service as anything else, as fixing a broken leg, as cancer treatment, we might want to say that, but maybe what our audience can hear is, for example, the amount of money that could be saved on our local healthcare and emergency services infrastructure if we were to implement this, or the extent to which the downtown core could be improved in its environment by having this facility. It's really that relatability to the audience, and these kinds of things are incredibly emotionally charged. So trying to push your perspective on someone else is often not, it just can't be heard. What they can hear is something that jives with what they already believe. So if someone already believes, for example, that addiction or quote unquote addicts are causing us too much tax money, let's say, I'm going to say I think that's absurd, but if that was a position, then we need to tell them a fact that actually helps them to understand that that's not the case, or that this solution you're putting forward helps to mitigate that and save those costs or save that pressure on the system. That's something they can hear, but we only know that if we think about this issue from the perspective of our audience, rather than getting polarized around positions, which is what we tend to do as humans. And unfortunately, we see lots of examples of it in the world today. That's what I would say.
Very cool. Thank you. Next question is from Alexandra. Do you have any advice on how to approach communications planning when you are short on time? Or another way to put that,
Such thing as bad qualitative research for the most part. So if you're in the middle of planning something and you're not quite sure if you're on the right track, try to choose someone, even if it's from within your own network. It's not as effective because they might tell you what you want to hear, but try to choose someone that you think you can bounce these things off of that is a little bit outside of the sphere of what you're doing. So almost call it research on the fly. Even if you say, can I bounce some things off of you in order for me to test a particular position, I would say that can be really valuable too. But always ask the question. Even if you only ask a couple of people, be sure before you go and make the investment that you're on the right track.
Perfect. Here's a question we've received from a few people. What should you do if you're in the doom cycle? How can you get out? And one person added, asking for a friend.
Yes, well, I can tell you I've been in the doom cycle, so I can relate to your friend. Excuse me. I would say it is a tough one. Often being able to make a case for why something is really important to be sustained is critical. I know that's hard to do when you're midstream, which is why I always try to, focus on, again, if you can do that research and you can demonstrate that the audience, that you really are on the right track with your audience, and also you can measure the effectiveness of what you're doing, so you can make a case for that sustained piece. That really often is the only way to go about it, because here would be an example of where, especially when you're publicly funded, the appeal to emotion, we should do this because it's the right thing, doesn't work as well, because people who are in charge of the purse strings are accountable to others. They're accountable to taxpayers, they're accountable to shareholders, they're accountable to the board, donors, etc. So in that case, your ability to collect as much data as you can, and it can be hard data, or it could be opinions from influencers who are involved in the cause and have seen some of the work you do and see the effectiveness of it, can be helpful in making a case for why, you need to make a sustained investment in something. I'm not sure if that answers the question particularly, but it's the developing that case for support in the same way that you would do for a fundraising campaign. There's a case for support you develop. It's the same idea as understanding the audience that holds the money or the dollars that you want to get or the people that you want to invest, understanding where they're coming from and making a case that works for them.
Very good. And with that, I believe we're just about at time. I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank you, Lindsay, again for spending this time with us today and 2 weeks ago, and for your amazing insights. So I think I speak on behalf of the entire audience when I say thank you so much for your time.
Well, I really appreciate it.
I also just wanted to take the opportunity to highlight a couple of learning opportunities that we have coming up. So the first one here, and complete a short webinar survey to offer feedback on how you enjoyed today's call. The link on your screen will be sent out to your email as well. Finally, thanks again everyone for following along. If you've been with us during our Diving Deeper series, we hope that you found it enriching. Thanks again, Lindsay, and I hope everyone has a good day.